What you just heard was the experience of a volcanic eruption, specifically the Hunga Tonga eruption that happened earlier this year on January 15th, 2022. The volcanic eruption beat ever to exist records, having the highest, tallest plume. But before we get into any more detail, let me give some background. Past eruptions shaped the Hunga Tonga to be what it is today. As you can see, it's changed its shape many times. The volcanic island of Hunga Tonga and Hunga Ha'apai were originally two pre-existing islands, the Ha'apai and the Hunga Tonga, and they were joined together by the 2015 eruption into a single island landmass. The Hunga Tonga volcano is what's known as a stratovolcano. Stratovolcanoes tend to be large, cone-shaped volcanoes and are characterized by felsic intermediate flows. Viscous magma tends to be less flowy and causes its volcanoes to be much more explosive and therefore dangerous. They are commonly found along convergent boundaries, and stratovolcanoes are usually fueled by the magma of the subducting plate. Like many stratovolcanoes, the Hunga Tonga sits on a convergent boundary. It is on its own microplate, the Tonga Plate, but it's largely in between the Indo-Australian and the Pacific Plate. At this boundary, the Pacific Plate subducts under the Indo-Australian Plate due to their difference in density. The denser plate sinks under, and the sinking plate ends up melting as it enters the Earth, and this rising of magma is what fuels the Hunga Tonga.
So the main eruption of Hunga Tonga occurred on January 15th, 2022. This eruption was far from ordinary, as the sheer size of the explosion broke numerous records and is now officially the largest explosive eruption of the 21st century. Measurements of the pressure wave that the blast created, which traveled around the world around 4 times in 6 days, was equivalent to the 1883 eruption of the infamous Krakatoa. And while the volcano itself was left mostly intact after the eruption, marine geologist Kevin McKay noted that there was fine sandy mud and deep ash ripples as far as 50 kilometers away from the volcano. So to demonstrate the true magnitude of this eruption, here's a graphic that illustrates what a hypothetical eruption of Hunga Tonga would look like if it happened in Europe. And you can really just see the sheer magnitude of the eruption. Moreover, the size of the actual volcano at its base is around 20 kilometers across and rises around 2 kilometers from its base to the surface of the ocean. And this next image shows satellite imagery of the plume of the volcano. And amazingly, this plume launched gas, ashes, and water vapor past the stratosphere and into the mesosphere, which is an upper thermal zone of the atmosphere in which little ozone is present.
The eruption's effects devastated the citizens of Tonga Tapu, Iu, and Ha'apai, the 3 main islands of Tonga. Volcanic ash traveled 36 miles into the atmosphere, and inches of volcanic ash and sand covered the buildings that remained. Personal belongings were lost or destroyed, and food or water supplies were contaminated with ash. After the eruption, the pyroclastic debris fell into people's clean drinking water, taking away their fresh water supplies. Over 85% of the population was affected, which is a staggering 85,000 people. The explosion caused $90.4 million in damages, injured 19 people, and took 6 lives. The volcanic eruption also triggered a series of tsunamis. It caused 2 kinds of tsunamis: a classic tsunami, which is caused by large volume displacement of the water, but also meteor tsunamis caused by fast-moving pressure displacement in the atmosphere. Waves reached as high as 85 feet above the sea level and affected people around the world, including Peru, Hawaii, Fiji, California, and Russia. The volcano was so deadly because it was an underwater stratovulcano. This means that the hydrosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, and geosphere were all involved in this eruption. Melissa Scruggs from UC Santa Barbara and Professor Frank Spera were some of the first people to start exploring why the eruption was so catastrophic. They suggest that the reason had to do with the much smaller eruption on January 14th. This eruption caused the volcano's main vent to sink below the ocean surface. The smaller event allowed excess seawater to seep in, which then, when combined with gas, sent the plume shooting high into the atmosphere, so high that it broke records. Contrary to past volcanoes, which caused a temporary cooling of the earth due to ash particles blocking the sun, this eruption caused temporary warming. This is due to the vent sinking underwater as it shot large amounts of water, which has a high capacity to store heat, into the atmosphere. Looking past the physical damages, the eruption also took a huge toll on the mental health of many. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 32,000 children were psychologically affected by this emergency. 11-year-old Moi He Kelsey was one of these children. She describes the journey back to her home after the eruption, how her brother had to keep stopping to wipe falling ash from the windscreen, and how upon returning to their home, they found their house in shambles with their belongings completely gone. In response to this disaster, many organizations stepped in to help provide aid to the affected citizens. Most of the aid was given through monetary donations. Tonga's government announced a recovery and resilience building plan that called for about $240 million, and which focused its efforts on vulnerable populations.